So what do rich parents teach their kids? Do they teach them different things to that of poorer or middle class parents? Well, let's just have a little explore of this. Now, for all intents and purposes, this is going to be our rich dad for this section. Okay, just pretend he is your rich dad. Now, if you haven't heard of Richard Kiyosaki, I would urge you to Google him and begin to study him. Now, he wrote this incredible book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right back in the dark ages of the 90s. And this was a game changer for me at a reasonably young age. He completely changed the way I thought about life, education, and building any form of wealth. Now, in this section, we're going to take a look at a couple of the most important concepts that he teaches in his book. Now, the concepts or principles we shall look at in this section are directly related to you starting your business and becoming much more of a rich thinker. Now, the first principle, and probably one of the most important penny dropping moments for me when I read this book, is this: the rich don't trade time for money. Instead, they acquire assets that make money for them. Okay, let's just have a think about this for a moment, and particularly about what we are taught and encouraged to do throughout our lives. Now, what does our education system teach us to do? And what do most of us spend the majority of our working lives doing? Yes, exactly. Trading time for money. This is what most people believe to be the way to make money. You go to work and you perform some form of task for remuneration. Yes, absolutely. There are some people who get paid £10 an hour. There are others who get paid £150 per hour. But they are still trading time for money. And given the fact that time is finite, can you possibly get rich trading time for money? In most cases, absolutely not. Unless, of course, you are a movie star, footballer, or a pop star. But when you think about it, even those guys are not actually trading all of their time for money. They are not paid an hourly wage in the sense that most people in employment are. And what about doctors and lawyers? Surely they are wealthy. But the key point here is that they are only paid whilst they are working. They are substituting their time for money, albeit a much larger amount of money than most of the population. So why is it that the majority of us simply trade our time for money? This basically comes down to the fact because this is what we are taught in our education system, and most often by our parents. So therefore, the big question is, what would a rich dad teach you to do? Now, the answer is actually quite simple. Acquire assets such as property and businesses rather than liabilities. Now, okay, you need money to acquire property. And if you don't own property, then this is something that you should be looking at doing in the future. But what about businesses? Well, you are in exactly the right place to do that. You will start behaving like a rich person when you start to create your side business. Yes, it would be nice to just buy a business that is already spitting out a few grand a month. But for most of us, we are not in this position. Besides, it is much more satisfying to build your own business from scratch. Now, it's important at this stage that we are clear on exactly what an asset is and what a liability is. So, I would like you to take a few moments to jot down as many purchases that you have made throughout your entire adult life that you can remember over the value of, say, £200. This may include things such as cars, bikes, holidays, the rental in your home, if you've bought a property, expensive clothes, a crazy night out. Now put each one of these purchases into either the assets column or the liabilities column. Please take a few moments to do this now and pause the video. So when you were carrying out this exercise, what did you define as an asset? And what did you define as a liability? Now, the rules for distinguishing between an asset and a liability are actually incredibly simple. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket, whereas a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Now, understanding the difference between an asset and a liability is one of the major steps in starting to think like a successful business person. So let's take a look at your car as an example. Now, if you don't own a car, please just imagine that you do for the moment. So first of all, does your car pay you? Probably not, unless of course you're renting it out. Therefore, can it be said to be an asset? Secondly, how much does it cost you per month? And how much is it worth? Is it even a relevant question to ask how much it is worth if it is not paying you a monthly wage? And what about if you own a classic car which will actually appreciate in value over time? Is this an asset? Well, quite simply, ask yourself the question, does it put money into your pocket? Well, it might do eventually when you decide to sell it in 10 or 20 years' time. But right here, right now, it is not an asset because it is not putting money into your pocket. And therefore, quite simply, it is a liability because it is costing you money to keep it. So let's take a look at your home. Now, if you do not own your own home, then just for the purposes of this exercise, pretend that you do. So we ask ourselves the same questions. Does your home pay you? Well, if you're living in it, probably not. You're probably paying to live there. You'll have electricity bills, insurance, etc., etc. So it costs you money per month to live in it. So what about if we look at how much equity you have in your home? Now, even if you own your home outright, it can still be classed as a liability. This is because, once again, it is not paying you a monthly wage. You are paying to keep it. Yes, you are deriving a lot of benefit from it, but it is costing you money. And it was this principle that Robert Kiyosaki introduced to the world, that your home is not an asset, that caused so much controversy. But when you really think about it and break it down, it completely makes sense. An asset puts money into your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. So the key point here is that cash flow is king. If your asset is not producing positive cash flow, then it is not an asset. So this is very simply why we are going to build a side gig. A side gig is an out and out asset. It is a cash flowing asset that puts money into your pocket. Now, if you fully understood the key differences between an asset and a liability, then congratulations, you are now thinking like a rich person.